this has been rumoured for months and months, and particularly the speculation that Zelenskyy was going to get his marching orders has been pretty intense over the last week or two. There are many suggestions about why this has come about. Zelenskyy himself is extremely popular with both Ukrainians and in the armed forces, especially. And there was some suspicion that he had presidential aspirations. There were some reports that he was effectively chosen to take the fall for Ukraine's failed counteroffensive. And still others that Kiev was cross that he'd taken to publishing a couple of articles in CNN and The Economist talking about Ukraine's strategy.
Okay, interesting. What was it? What happened in the counteroffensive that meant it wasn't as successful as had been hoped?
Well, particularly the United States and NATO, when they were advising the Ukrainians, were suggesting a single-focused effort. Mobilize all your forces and push through. The Ukrainian armed forces and the president's office have been kind of split on whether Crimea should be the focus or whether the eastern parts of Ukraine should be the focus, which meant that they divided that. And if you divide your military effort, often you dilute it by about 50% or so. And I think that's probably been part of the reason that it failed. The other reason, of course, is lack of things like air power and the fact that the Russians have prepared a very, very deep defensive line because they had forewarning of this counteroffensive for about 6 months.
Tell us about the new man then, Alexander Syrskyi.
Yeah, so Zelenskyy is, in fact, not very popular with the Ukrainian armed forces. There's been plenty of grumblings that he's been too prepared to throw away lots of lives at the expense of some fairly small tactical gains. But on the other hand, Zelenskyy is a very, very experienced commander, more so, in fact, in a way than Zelenskyy. He's been around for longer. He was responsible for the defense of Kiev in 2022, which was extremely successful, and also in places like Bakhmut, where the Ukrainian armed forces were able to to capture and to destroy a large number of Russian forces. So I think this change in pace or change in faces by the Ukrainian armed forces and the president's office is less about really changing strategy and more about finding someone that can work effectively with President Zelenskyy.
Yeah, President Zelenskyy has said he wants to see more high-tech solutions. You do wonder what they could be, because it does seem, particularly with the equipment that the Americans have been supplying, it's quite high-tech stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this conflict is strange in that it's got echoes of World War I, but also a foretaste of the types of conflicts to come. Lots of drone warfare, lots of adaptation of things like mini submarines that are used as drones, been highly effective against Russia's Black Sea Fleet. So I think Zelenskyy is probably looking to NATO partners and looking to other countries to be able to supply these types of things so that the Ukrainians get a sort of force multiplier on the battlefield. Because, of course, Russia has the overwhelming advantage when it comes to just raw cannon fodder that it can throw at the conflict.
Finally, Matthew, how much of what happens going ahead now into the future, how much depends on what happens in November in America?
Oh, to be honest, I think everything depends on it. The election of a second Trump administration would, fairly swiftly, I think, lead to the end of American support for Ukraine. And 2024 already is going to be a very grim year for Ukrainians. So, if Trump ends up victorious, this will determine, I think, the shape of that conflict and whether Russian aggression succeeds or whether the West is able to push back against it.
Matthew Sussex, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lorna.